Europe faces mounting pressures to secure its borders. The European Commission unveils bold plans to accelerate deportation of illegal migrants, a move sparking fierce debate. With Austria rejecting asylum seekers turned away by Germany, and Brussels proposing bans on re-entry for deporting individuals, divisions deepen among member states. But at what cost does this pursuit of control come? From crowded transit camps to bustling cities, the human toll and geopolitical stakes demand answers. Who truly decides the European borders? Welcome to Think Tank.
Our world is becoming unhinged.
The Luxembourg Times has reported that the European Commission proposes return hubs in third countries to deport unauthorized migrants and rejected asylum seekers, ensuring compliance with fundamental rights. A European return order aims to streamline cross-border enforcement of deportation decisions. Despite demands from EU states for stricter policies, the plan faces legal challenges as seen in failed UK and Italy attempts. Data from the third quarter of 2024 reveals inefficiencies. 112,335 expulsion orders were issued, but only 27,740 were executed. Part of the EU's 2026 Migration Pact, the proposal reflects Europe's struggle to balance security, solidarity and human rights amid rising anti-immigration pressures. According to Slopton Packet newspaper, European Commissioner Magnus Brunner presents a proposal for stricter deportation measures, including faster procedures, entry of up to 20 years, and detention for security threats. Currently, only 20% of return decisions result in a deportation gap. The EU aims to close the unified rules across member states. The plan introduces an EU return order to streamline deportations and pledges fundamental rights guarantees amid NGO criticism. A framework for safe third countries is expected by June 2025. Separately, Austria is urged to open the labor market and offer training to asylum seekers to combat human trafficking as victim numbers remain stable but workplace exploitation rises. As asylum applications in Europe are surging, reigniting debates over security and humanitarian obligations, stricter border controls, detention policies, and offshore processing defines the EU's response, but at what cost?
Overcrowded refugee camps in transit zones stand in stark contrast to Europe's bustling metropolises. In 2024, the continent faces a renewed refugee crisis, with asylum applications surpassing 1 million, comparable to the influx of 2015. But this time, the European response is different. Governments are tightening border controls, enforcing fast-track deportations and expanding detention facilities, fueling a growing debate over human rights and European identity. Under the new Pact on Migration and Asylum, EU nations are implementing stricter measures. Border procedures now include mandatory security screenings, biometric data collection, and prolonged detention periods for asylum seekers. Germany has reinstated stationary border checks, Croatia has expanded detention sites, and agreements with third countries, such as Tunisia and Albania, have outsourced asylum processing, raising legal and ethical concerns. For those fleeing war, persecution, and climate disasters, the road to safety is increasingly uncertain. Offshore processing centers in Rwanda and Albania have drawn heavy criticism, with activists calling them a violation of international refugee protections. Meanwhile, thousands remain in limbo, held in overcrowded transit centers with limited access to legal aid and basic services. Yet, amid restrictive policies, local communities are stepping in. Solidarity networks in European cities provide shelter, education, and mentorship programs to asylum seekers. In places like Glasgow, Amsterdam, and Barcelona, municipal-led initiatives are bridging policy gaps, ensuring that some refugees find stability. As Europe struggles to balance security with humanitarian commitments, the question remains: will migration policies reflect the values of compassion and inclusion, or will deterrence continue to shape the continent's approach?
To provide more analysis about the most recent updates concerning the European Commission's intentions to speed up the procedure of deporting illegal immigrants in response to increasing pressures from several member states, who decides the fate of the European borders, we're joined from Amsterdam by Abu Bakr Bathib, the president of the European Polling Centre, and from Brussels by Dr. Kamila Zaracha-Romanowska, professor of EU law and security studies and an advisor to the EU and NATO. Thank you both for joining us here on Qnews. Firstly, let's start off with Mr. Bathib. How does the European Commission justify expediting deportation while upholding its commitments under the 1951 Refugee Convention?
We should know that the EU is confronting a serious and a great crisis. First, therefore, on top of the priorities of this crisis comes the asylum application, along with the tensions with Donald Trump policy. EU wanted to solve these problems, on top of which the refugee crisis, and therefore today is trying to put the refugees within a set of restricted measures in order to overcome such a crisis, regarding that for those who have been rejected their asylum or refugees applications and the societal protections. Therefore, Europe do not wish for those 25% of rejections of the humanitarian protection applications to stay in Europe, that would increase or lead to a security crisis, as all of them lives illegally. Today it's not only just the European Commission that is talking about this, also the government in Germany. Its coalition shall be formed to restrain the refugees' applications in Britain, in Romania, and in upcoming April will announce a declaration would end of the great openness of receiving the refugees and would increase the restraint, the mobility of the irregular refugees through establishing centers at the borders, either in Greece or Italy or Spain.
Okay, Dr. Romanowska, what legal framework is Brussels leveraging to enforce a ban on re-entry for forcibly deported migrants, and how might this strain the diplomatic ties with the origin countries?
Well, first of all, we have to remind ourselves that one of the key EU elements of, let's say, ensuring together the international agreement is strict alignment with United Nations Global Compact on Migration, on orderly migration, we can even highlight. This is actually one of the things which clearly addresses migration challenges while trying to upholding ethical standards. Let's not forget that EU is quite, let's say, generous donor when it comes to the development support, but this is coming hand in hand with certain obligations from the countries of the origin of certain of migrants who are, let's say, who are obliged to restrict irregular migration, which is actually one of the biggest threats for migrants' lives, especially in the situation when they come in through transit country, facing several unhuman treatment from the hands of traffickers and in the transition camps, etc. We have to take into account as well that while we are trying to expand legal pathways on migration, especially in this context, legal migration such as humanitarian visas, work permits, education, scholarship, etc., etc., we have to see here that we are talking about those, especially who are going to face a return decision. The return decision is different, yes.
Yeah, but many of these people that are illegally migrating towards Europe, a lot of them are facing, dire conditions, and that's the reason why they're immigrating illegally. They're trying to avoid, they're fleeing from war zones or they're fleeing from persecution and so forth. How can the EU handle this situation? Because it's also sensitive, like on a human level, not just for
I absolutely agree with you, but we have to see here two different things. But we have EU acquis on migration and refugee protection, which will be handed in the context of those who are escaping war zone, those who are facing certain consequences. And EU is really, really having extremely strong watchdogs, such a European Court of Justice, such a European Court of Human Rights, who even said in this, let's say, quite livid protection and limited interpretation in human rights, but there is no situation of refoulement. We have to illustrate here, but what they're trying to do is to strengthen international cooperation to enhance return and reintegration programs. So actually, having those who already have, let's say, been treated in certain ways as a not successful applicants for certain aspects of legal staying in the EU, they already have been, let's say, having this return order being issued. So they are about to be deported. The problem is that we having quite a lot of people who remain illegally in the Europe, and that's the reason why certain facilities who can actually adopt those who are fleeing war zone are overcrowded. The issue is as well that there is a really big let's say demographic influx in certain countries, especially those of who are the source of, let's say, the provenance of the irregular migrants, the economic migrants who are trying to find a better life. But the issue is that we cannot, let's say, favorite them when it comes to their support and their development in the context of supporting at the same time those who are flying the persecution, inhuman treatment, deportations from their own countries because they have been expelled due to the political reason, etc. That's the reason why we really have to ensure that why, for instance, they founded economic project in Africa, Middle East, and Asia. This is a way to reduce incentives for irregular migration, but actually solving out the problems which are in their countries of origin, of the region of origin, as well as supporting peacekeeping operation to ensure that they will stay in their countries and literally allow the countries to flourish in themselves. This is a very difficult situation because we have to take into account that EU is now even more stronger and stronger cooperating when it comes to the security, and it's all security. And we can see here the very good cooperation with Tunisia and Morocco and other MENA countries when it comes to the integrated border management. What it is to enhance local border security, preventing smugglers from operating freely, especially those are as well trafficking of human beings, trafficking of drugs, trafficking of arms, etc. So those who actually living on exploitation of those people who are having a really great ideas and great hopes to find a better life in the EU. And while we're prioritizing legal migration pathways, the humanitarian visas and economic investment, it's true, but EU needs to create sustainable solutions which ensure that individuals who qualify to asylum will not remain illegally within its borders, but will have actually support to claim their rights and to apply for the asylum. I'm sorry if I heard that I'm speaking too much, but
No,
the
take
economic
your time.
migrants, they do not undermine migration governments. EU is really looking forward to long-term vision to prioritize development, security, and human, but really firm approach to migration challenges. This is the reason why there is certain tension, especially when it comes to the especially European Court of Human Rights cases regarding the non-refoulement and pushbacks. Because, for instance, in Saidi against Italy, they had said that there is no case of department if there is, even if the individual who is trying to enter is posing security threats. So it's really, really important that this is taken into the consideration, even for the person who might be a security threat within the Europe, but might can have.
Yes. If we could also, I apologize, but like we could also get Mr. Bathib's, input into this as well and get his ideas on it. I'm not sure if you've caught what Ms. Romanowska had talked about. She talked about the European Union basically attempting on different levels to stop immigration or illegal immigration into the EU through security measures, in addition to cooperating with the origin countries economically and so forth. So, sir, my question here is, do you agree with this, and why are Austria and Germany clashing over asylum responsibilities? And what does this reveal about internal EU solidarity on migration policies?
It is a very important question, particularly with the actual measurement of Germany elections that led to far-wing right government that has several measures regarding the refugees. That also resulted by the actions of the European Commission, even in the level of European countries, as they're trying to hold agreement with the offshore countries in the north in order to control more of the numbers coming into the European countries. And that had a great success previously that led to the increased grants of Mauritania and Turkey and to limit the numbers of refugees. But now, with the Convention of Immigration and Asylum that will be effected in the upcoming general, that would lead to actual measurements of countries such as Netherlands and Brussels and Britain, even though it is out of the EU framework. Such measures will contribute to limit the numbers of refugees and the possibilities for those who became or have the right of humanitarian protection to be integrated into a set of programs in order to contribute of European economy. There's also another aspect that the European economy is living in some periods of a higher inflation that require skilled workers, technical workers, to create some sort of imbalance for those people who are entitled to these societal protections to be integrated in the manpower market. And also, the elections programs included that for those who will not actually be have highly skilled of the language that will be deported, as well as Britain limited to grant residence and national citizenship for those who are coming irregularly. These are escalated and mounting measures since the past January that will until the end of the 2025 and in January 2026 will be the decisive point, and these are the preliminary measurements, but it seems that the European Union has become very serious in tackling such an issue and find real some sort of understanding to limit the crisis of refugees. As I said, the EU is facing a group of crises regarding the European citizens and the higher inflation rates and the Ukrainian and Russian conflict and the stances with the USA. All these matters are trying to be rearranged and to put in the priorities to be executed in the upcoming year, and their government that came out of elections and to achieve the results. And there's another point to conclude. There are some main countries on top of which, such as Germany and Netherlands, that had a far-right government last week that adopted certain very restricted laws, and Austria and Denmark as well as Sweden.
Okay, Dr. Romanowska, if we could get your opinion as well. Are the new measures against asylum seekers among migrants related to the rise of right-wing parties within the European Union? And also, is this considered a violation of the UN's principles regarding human rights?
Well, first of all, we have to take into account that what EU is trying really now to do is actually solving the problems which is lying to effective use of Return Directive 2018-2115, which is a problem for a long time because the return number is 20%. Return number is amount 20% of all return decisions regarding deportation of those who are fake asylum seekers or are irregular migrants intercepted to return to their countries of origin or first country they enter in. This is not the same thing as asylum system. We have to take into account that while EU is facing for a long time the European system of return creation, it was a really long issue and really long term of cooperation when it comes to the creation of even European map of migration. What EU is trying to do with the European Returns Order is to intend to facilitate the departure of those individuals from the entire EU rather than only from the single member state. This is to try to prevent multiple asylum application across the different countries, which is called asylum shopping. At the same time, they as well agree to detention of certain individuals up to 2 years, it's true. But what they're trying to do is by creating offshore return hubs, they're trying to establish specific safeguards, excluding first and unaccompanied minors and families with family, to, let's say, manage returns in more efficient way. But clearly it attracted load of criticism. We have to see here from this low return rates, but EU is really trying to ensure that this is going to be harmonized on EU level. And we can see here that Hans Leitner, who is new Frontex head, is really very strong when it comes to the protection of fundamental rights. Frontex, which is European Border and Coast Guard Agency, plays a crucial role in supporting member states with border control, but as well with the return operation. And it's even from this risk analysis from recent year, it's highlighted the evolving risks and challenges on external borders. And it is really emphasizing agency commitment to secure human border management. That includes return. EU has from some quite long 2 or 3 years, Mari Juric, which is coming from the Frontex previously, who is head of the EU, who is EU coordinator for return. This is actually to ensure that the motivation to ensure that those who are asylum seekers, refugees, and other undocumented migrants will be treated fairly. We cannot forget that European Court of Human Rights is going beyond and above when it comes to the interpretation, the principle of non-refoulement. So there will be no returns of refugees to territories where they can face persecution. And there will be no policy which will increase risk of returning individuals to unsafe conditions, which could cause a violation of this principle. Let's not forget as well that a part of the Convention of Refugees, European Union has European Convention of Human Rights. That's the first, and that's European Code of Human Rights in Strasbourg. But it has as well European Charter of Fundamental Rights, which established as well protection against arbitrary detention and inhuman treatment. And the European Court of Human Rights has already ruled many times that there is no deportation without proper legal safeguards. Of course, now the EU has to go to above and beyond to ensure that there will not lead to human rights violations. So that's a challenge, but they have to face to.
Unfortunately, we're out of time for this episode, but thank you so much for joining us, and thank you both for joining us here on A Think Tank. That was Abu Bakr Basib, the president of the European Polling Centre. I'm Dr. Kamila Romanowska, a professor of EU law and security studies, an advisor to the EU and NATO. Thank you both for your insights, and thank you for joining us. As Europe grapples with its toughest migration questions, the balance between security and humanity hangs on the balance. Who truly decides the fate of its borders? The answers will shape not only Europe's future, but the global identity. This brings us to the end of today's episode of Think Tank. Thank you for watching. I'm Rehan Morsi, and stay tuned for more here on Qnews.